It is officially week 4, the final week of Intro to Birding. Just pretty wild. As always, let me know if you're having trouble hearing me or seeing the screen. Just put that in the chat or any questions that you have throughout the class. With that, we'll go ahead and jump on in. So this week we're going to be focusing on some migratory visitors, either ones that you only see in certain seasons or ones that just pass on through. Then we'll finish up with our birding spot of the week and our last tip for being a bird friend. So our tool highlight for this week are information sources. So obviously any like field guide or anything like that is a really, really good source of information, books, places like that. However, it's always good, especially to keep up to date on new information, because like with our Cooper's hawk, birds can change taxonomical families. We have a couple birds we'll talk about today that just either joined a new family or started their own within the past couple decades. So just to stay up to date on, taxonomy and new research, there are some really good online sources. Obviously, one of the best ones is the Cornell Lab. So it's just allaboutbirds.com. You can go in. This is what it'll look like on the home screen. They have live cams that you can watch. You can take some courses on there. And then you can search specific birds. So if you were to search in white-breasted nuthatch, this is what first comes up. You'll get kind of an overview of their behavior, where they're found, their sounds. You can go further into identification info, into the life history, and learn about conservation and breeding habits and their food habits and all of that. Look at range maps, and that's where you can go in and look at specific sightings logged through eBird. And then sounds, and these are all sounds uploaded by different sources, and it'll actually say like where that sound is. So if it's a bird that's found nationwide, it'll tell you, oh, this was recorded in Colorado, or this was recorded in New York. So yeah, this is kind of that overview where you'll get a basic description, you'll get some tips, can you find them at your feeder? How do you attract them to a feeder? The general range map, and then where you're going to find that bird, where to look for it, not just habitat-wise, but actually within that habitat. Another great online source that's very similar is audubon.org, obviously run by the Audubon Society. It does a very similar function. It'll give you kind of an at-a-glance, range, behavior. Gives you a nice, easy, all-together, easy to notice on one screen. Give you population numbers, so you can see kind of how they're doing. We have a lot of white-breasted nuthatches, which is pretty good. And then if you scroll down, it'll also give you, and All About Birds does this as well, it'll give you some similar birds. So either in visual, what birds that might look like it, or birds that might behave that same way. So the brown creeper, we'll talk a little later about it, but it doesn't look anything like a white-breasted nuthatch, but it does go up and down tree trunks like that nuthatch does. And so, it has a similar behavior. So even if you're looking up a bird and you're like, it was, had this white head and black cap, and I'm not entirely sure, you look at a white-breasted nuthatch and you're like, it doesn't look quite like that. You can go further down and see, oh, okay, here are some other birds that it might be. So we have a good amount of birds that can be seen in the wintertime here. Some of these are year-round residents. We've talked about many of them, but a couple of them are just winter visitors. So we'll dive into winter visitors and summer, as well as some of our spring and fall migratory birds. So we have our winter wren is it's a winter visitor here. These guys were actually are a pretty recent addition to being their own species. For a long time, up until about up about 2010. The winter wren, Pacific wren, and Eurasian wren were all thought to be the same species of bird. And they found that there's enough behavioral and physical differences that make them actually 3 separate species of wren. Which the Eurasian wren is the only non-American wren, so it kind of makes sense that we would try to like, well, all the other wrens are here, so this one must just be this species that went somewhere else. They are described on Cornell, or by Cornell, as a plump, round ball with a stubby tail. So they're a very small, round bird. They tend to bob their entire body while they kind of look around. So if you ever see them, they almost look like they're doing squats. They're just constantly bobbing. They're also described as a rather weak flyer. So they don't really go long distances at once. They kind of go between tree to tree. You'll see them a lot on fallen logs or down close to the ground. Usually kind of flipping over leaves and scratching around looking for some bugs to eat. Now, they, like their Carolina wren cousin, they are very loud. Per unit weight, they deliver their song with 10 times more power than a rooster crowing. So they're big, little bird, big voice. So these guys you'll see around winter time here. And then we will also get our hermit thrush, which has this brown body, very speckled breast on it. It has kind of smudgy spots as well. So you'll notice they start out crisp and then they kind of get smudgier as they go further towards the belly. They have a reddish tail, which is pretty unique among thrushes. It kind of helps set them apart from other thrushes, as well as that white eye ring, which can kind of help distinguish them. They do a behavior called foot quivering, so they like to eat bugs, and a lot of times you'll see them either near grass or in the grass. If they're in the grass, they will take their foot and kind of shake some of the blades of grass and kind of shake up some insects for them. These guys are usually the last to go south in the fall and the first to head north in the spring. So they're pretty hardy to some colder temperatures. You're more likely to see them a little bit later in the year and a little bit earlier. Pine siskins are a pretty cute little winter resident that we get. Most of them are very brown. There is a green morph that can happen. It's pretty rare, but it is. It's seen. They don't have any sexual dimorphism, so males and females look exactly the same. They are a type of finch, despite their name. They are in that finch family, which means that they are seed eaters. And they are very, very good at eating seeds. So they can actually store up to 10% of their weight in seeds in their crop, which is like a part of their esophagus. And then that can help fuel them. So they are very hardy to cold winter nights. They can, even on nights that are as low as, I think it's around -40 degrees Fahrenheit, they'll just ramp up their metabolic rate and for several hours at a time, just basically go into overdrive and keep themselves running so hot that they don't freeze. And that ability to store those seeds in that crop can actually help to fuel them during this. So a lot of times you'll see them near old agricultural fields or really stocking up on seeds in the wintertime. They also have probably one of the best scientific names of the birds that we're talking about today. I think Spinus pinus is just a fantastic scientific name. And they are also good at putting on weight to kind of help survive those nights. So they'll put on half again as much winter weight as goldfinches, which is their pretty close cousin. And then we have our brown creepers, which are tiny, tiny, tiny birds. Can sometimes be confused with nuthatches just because of their behavior. So these guys are about 0.2 to 0.3 ounces in weight. For reference, a slice of sandwich bread weighs about an ounce. So these guys weigh about 2/10 of a slice of bread. They're itty bitty. But you'll usually see them hopping up large trees, so they'll kind of go in a spiral around the trunk. They're known for finding the biggest tree possible to go up. They like, little bird, big tree, I guess. And they are looking for bugs. So that nice hooked beak helps them to get into little cracks and crevices in the trunk to get those bugs. And a lot of times as they are spiraling up the tree, they'll pass the nuthatches going down. So if you're not able to see like color, if you can't really get a good look at size, just looking at what direction they're moving, nuthatches tend to face down, whereas brown creepers will face up. Brown creepers can also have been used as an indicator species for logging impacts on forests, because that they require those big trees in order to find the bugs that they want. Whether or not they stick around in a habitat can kind of indicate, okay, are we overlogging? Are we, doing well? So they help us with some science as well, just by their presence or lack thereof. We got our little kinglets. So around here in the winter, we will see golden crown kinglets fairly commonly. Even when they're not excited, they have that yellow crown visible. They have that beautiful black eye stripe right behind their eye and that flashy crest on them. Males will have a little bit of orange in the middle of their crown. Females don't have that orange. That's the main difference visually between the two. They're pretty small. They're barely bigger than a hummingbird. So this is a pretty small bird to be looking for. They're pretty hardy. You'll see them in areas where the nights get well below freezing. And one of their adaptations for withstanding these temperatures, which I think is just adorable, is that each of their nostrils is covered in a teeny tiny feather. So that kind of helps insulate them a little bit. These guys are often very, very high up in the trees. So you're probably going to see them just by you notice something very tiny moving around and then try to train your eye up to it. Very rarely we will get a ruby-crowned kinglet around. We are a little bit too far north for them to comfortably visit, but all of them have this red crest, but it's only visible when they're excited. So this could be a male with that red crest, just not flashing it. They also have that white eye ring and then a white bar on their wing. So if you see one and you're like, oh, that looks kinglet sized and shaped, but you can't get a glimpse of the crown, looking for that white eye ring, they'll help set it apart from the golden crown kinglet. They also are known for constantly flicking their wings as they're hopping around, so it's kind of a behavioral indication that can help with identification. So jumping into our summer visitors with warblers are our main migratory poster child that we have. The American redstart is a very, very striking warbler. The males are pitch black. They've got that orange on the wings. Females are more of a gray, but they have that yellow patch right underneath their wings and then a little yellow patch on their wings. And then on both of them, you can kind of see they've got a little yellow patch under their tail. They mostly eat berries and bugs. They do breed in this area, so you're likely to see them throughout the summer. They tend to show up around mid-April, leave sometime in October. And they're a big fan of eating, they'll eat both berries and bugs. So they're not quite specialists. They'll pretty much eat anything they can get a hold of. But they're called redstarts because, and that's a whole type of bird, they're not necessarily all related to each other. That redstart is more a behavioral name. But they will use those patches, those bright patches on their wings to startle prey. So they'll hop around on a branch and kind of flash those bright wings, and bugs will hop up and then they can catch them. And then we have our golden-winged warbler. These are very slim, very kind of silvery gray birds, even though both of them look quite brown. I think they're both plumped up in these photos. They have these little golden patches on, they've got that golden head, little golden spot on the top of their wing. Unfortunately, these guys have seen a pretty significant population decline over the last 50 years or so. Possible, most likely causes would be habitat loss, and then also invasive birds outcompeting them. They are pretty commonly outcompeted by some invasive species. So a little bit of a contribution there. But since 2019, it's looking like their numbers are stabilizing, which is awesome. So people creating some of those little way stations and corridors is helping. These guys really love they love all bugs, but their main prey seems to be moths, caterpillars, and spiders. So pretty useful to have around. And again, if you have trees that attract a lot of caterpillars or plants that attract caterpillars, you're more likely to attract cute little warblers to come eat those caterpillars for you. They are also known for hybridizing with blue-winged warblers, and there's a whole bunch of hybrid colors that will be produced by that. But they're just hybrids. There's quite a few hybrids when it comes to warblers. Several species will hybridize. These guys, they're just migratory. They don't stick around to breed here. You'll usually see them in May and then again in mid-August through September as they're moving on through. We've got Tennessee warbler. This guy got his name not because that they are in Tennessee. They are migratory through Tennessee. Their closest breeding grounds to that state is actually up in northern Michigan. They're called Tennessee warblers because Alexander Wilson, who's considered the father of American ornithology, saw one in Tennessee. And so because that's where he saw it, that's where he named it. But they have a little gray head, that white eye stripe, and then that green back. Females are actually more colorful than the males. The females are almost all yellow. But they will always have that little white patch underneath their tail, which is a pretty good indication. So look for that eye stripe and then that white patch under the tail. They mostly eat small caterpillars. So again, you need those plants. They are known to be nectar thieves. So, most flowers produce nectar so that they can draw on a pollinator to come carry their pollen away. Tennessee warblers have figured out that if they just drill into the base of the flower, they can get at the nectar without having to get pollen all over them. So they don't really pollinate, but they do love that nectar. These guys are also migratory. Their peak is usually April through May, and then you'll see them again in mid-August through October. So there's a pretty big window of time where they're moving through, but you're not going to see them in the middle of the summer. Nashville warblers have the same story as far as their name. Alexander Wilson saw them in Nashville, and he said, all right, so that's your name. when you're an ornithologist and you have to name a lot of birds, you lose some creativity, I guess. So these guys have that gray hood. Their eyes look really big compared to their head, just because of this white eye ring kind of gives that illusion of a really big eye. They have a yellow, white, yellow pattern on their breast. So if you see them on the wing, you can kind of look for that little almost striping, or that patch pattern. And then that will help push you in the right direction of a Nashville warbler. Females and immatures tend to look similar. So this is the male, this is the female. They look pretty similar. Males will have a little bit of a brown patch on their head. They do have some different migratory paths as they age. Usually the first year, they'll migrate more along the Atlantic coast, and then as they get older, they'll move to more of the inland routes. So we usually don't see first-year warblers here in Ohio. Usually we're seeing them, they're a couple years old. They love to eat bugs. These guys, you won't have to crane your neck to see, hopefully. You're usually about mid-level in the forest. They really like brushy, semi-open habitats. These guys, their peak is going to be April through May, and then August through September. Northern Parula warbler, good luck seeing them. I hear them all the time, and I have yet to actually see one. I think I have to go to McGee Marsh to actually see one with my eyes. They hang out at the very, very, very tops of the tree canopies, and they are pretty small. But they have this gray back, little flash of white on their, or yellow on their back, yellow throat, kind of these white half circle eye rings, and then that yellow breast. They really like areas that have any sort of like hanging moss or lichen, so like Spanish moss, beard lichen, anything that kind of hangs over, they'll nest near there in those hanging clumps, and they like to eat the bugs that can be found there as well. They sound similar to the prairie warbler, which is why I put them together. Northern Parula sounds almost like a zipper going up. They have a very quick buzzing trill that goes up, whereas the prairie warbler almost sounds like a ping pong ball on the table, where it starts a little slower and then picks up speed and goes up in pitch. You'll see them here. They do breed here, although they'll build their nests anywhere where we have a lot of like hanging leaves or any moss lichens. And then you can usually see them or hear them mostly around here from mid-April through mid-October. So pretty much the whole warm season, which is pretty cool. Then we have our prairie warbler, again, more of a sound alike than a look-alike. These guys are bright yellow. They've got this black streaking on the sides of their belly. They have a semicircle eye patch underneath. And then the males have this chestnut back patch. The females tend to have, and the immatures tend to have a little bit of blurrier streaks. The males have these nice crisp streaks, but still look pretty similar. These guys prefer second growth forests, overgrown pastures, anywhere where there's big amounts of field. So they actually don't really mind deforestation as much. They're like, cool, more field for me. You'll see them usually, they are big bug eaters. You'll usually see them around leaves and branches picking bugs off. They don't really catch them on the wing very often. And they are pretty easily identified by their tail bobbing. So they will, as they're perched, they bob that tail up and down. A little bit of a form of communication, can kind of help them tell each other where they are. And these guys you'll see here through April through September. So again, they also will nest around here. So we get some good visitors. Yellow rumped warbler has a yellow rump. So they've got this beautiful bright yellow patch right on that rump, kind of in between their wings. They have black face mask, white throat, and then as well as this little yellow rump, they've got these yellow side patches. The males are a little more gray and have a little bit of a yellow crown on top of their head. They've got another little patch. The females are more brown. These guys, they don't breed in Ohio, but they are actually the only warbler that you are likely to see around here in the wintertime. So they actually will hang around. And because that they are here in the winter, they have to switch their diet from bugs a little bit. They will eat berries, and they have been seen especially loving poison ivy berries. So poison ivy does serve a purpose. Humans are one of the only animals that are allergic to it. And a lot of birds really like those berries, including this cute little yellow rumped warbler. In the summer, in the warm months, they are seen catching insects on the wing as well. So they're kind of a more talented flyer. A lot of warblers fly for distance rather than agility. So these guys have a little bit more fancy flying to them. And these guys you'll see usually January through May and then September through December. They do kind of head out for the hot months. Blackburnian warblers can be kind of confused with redstarts with all of that black on them, but they definitely have much more yellow on their head. And one of the most distinctive features of the Blackburnian warbler is this triangular eye patch that you can see on both male and female. That can really help, especially with the female, identify it as a Blackburnian warbler female. They have a longer body, so they tend to be a little more elongated than round. And they got that orange throat and face, and that black crown. Females are much more yellow than males are, but again, they've got that triangular eye patch that can help. They have winged eyeliner, and they have it very crisply. They are the only North American warbler that has an orange throat like that. So that's pretty easy. If you see a bright orange throat, Blackburnian warbler. They're another one that tends to be way up at the top of the canopy. There's something called warbler neck that you'll get when trying to find some of these guys. That's just craning your neck back for 20 minutes trying to get a lock on that warbler that's been hopping around for 20 minutes. These guys are migratory. They don't nest in Ohio, so you'll see them usually around May and then again in September. But you're probably not going to see them midsummer. They, like most warblers, are a bug eater, and they like the ones that are way up at the very tops. Occasionally, if there's not another warbler around, they'll come down further, but they're not very aggressive, so they don't want to take the good foraging spot away from another warbler. Yellow-throated warbler has a yellow throat. They have this black face mask and that white eyebrow going over. So that's another, if you're not sure, because with only one patch of yellow, it can be, am I missing another patch of yellow? That white eyebrow will also help. No sexual dimorphism on these guys. Males and females look the same. They're also a relatively large warbler, so they're about 5 inches long. So for comparison, a lot of the warblers are about 3 to 4 inches. So these guys are a little bigger. They tend to be seen hopping along tree branches. they're looking in the cracks, the crevices, looking for bugs. And you'll usually find them near a water source. So whether that's a swamp, stream, wetland, any creek, any sort of water, they like to hang out there. They do breed here in the summertime. You can see them April through September. They'll nest in the canopy of mature forests. So you do have to have a nice mature tree stand, and the nests are pretty high up, but they're not uncommon to see a little bit lower down in the tree canopy as they're moving around. Then we have our beautiful little cerulean warbler, which is blue. They're pretty much the color of the sky. The males are that nice, beautiful blue. Females can be a little bit more of a green, yellow, still pretty distinctive colors compared to other warblers. These guys, unfortunately, they love to be up at the top of the canopy, usually about 50 feet or more up. So hard to see, but they do like to be near gaps in the canopy. So that can help kind of get a look at them as they move in between trees. A lot of times they like white oaks, bitternut hickories, and sugar maples around here. So if you know your tree identification, you can kind of find what trees you're more likely to spot a cute little cerulean warbler in. And they do breed here. So they'll put their nest on top of a branch in the canopy, and they usually will try to find a spot that has a nice thick clump of leaves overhead so that it is concealing that nest from above. You'll see them April through September around here. So they're a cute little summer visitor that we get. Black and white warbler, also pretty distinctive colors. They're got black and white stripes on them. There is actually a difference between the males and the females. So females have more of a white throat. So if you look at this male, he's got a lot of black on the throat. This female has a lot of white. And then she'll have this grayer area behind her ear, whereas the male has nice dark black area. So there is actually a little bit of sexual dimorphism there. You're going to see these guys on trunks and the main branches of trees. They move similarly to a nuthatch, so they face their head down as they're going up and down the tree. Even though they like to hang out up in the branches on the trunks, they actually nest on the ground. So they'll build a little cup-shaped nest in the leaf litter. They are the only member of their genus. So this genus means moss plucking, because they can often be seen around clumps of moss plucking at it for the bug, or for the bugs that are in there. They are also a little bit of an aggressive little guy. They've been seen attacking chickadees, nuthatches, and redstarts that enter their territory. So they're not afraid to pick a fight. And these you'll see April through early October around here. They do nest, which is really awesome. We've got our cute little prothonotary warbler, which is a almost all yellow bird. So they're pretty large for a warbler. They're actually a little bit bigger than a Carolina chickadee, which is still a pretty small bird, but big for a warbler. They've got a bigger head and a longer bill than a lot of warblers, and they're kind of a little heftier. And then they have pretty short legs and a short tail. So they're a pretty compact little bird. They have this bright gold yellow all over their body, blue-gray wings and tail, and then a yellow olive back. And then females are a little bit paler yellow usually, but again, they all have this little white patch underneath their tail. You usually see them around like standing or slow moving water. So they really like wetlands, larger rivers, estuaries, places like that where there's not a lot of bubbling, quick moving water. They're cavity nesters. They'll usually take over an old cavity that's been drilled out by a woodpecker, or any like natural holes in like standing dead trees. And then they've been seen using nest boxes that have been put out. They eat bugs and have also been seen eating snails and mollusks, along with the normal grasshoppers and mosquitoes and such. And then you'll see them breeding around here, usually mid-April through mid-September. We've got our Kentucky warbler, who has the same naming story as the Tennessee and the Nashville warblers. Alexander Wilson saw one in Kentucky, and so that's how it got named. These guys, they do actually nest around this region, so that's one mark in their favor. You can actually see them nesting in Kentucky. They're a medium-sized warbler. They've got really long legs. So, I mean, if you look at them compared to that prothonotary warbler, their legs do look very long. They have yellow belly, and then they're kind of this olive green above. Males will have black sideburns and a black crown. Females also have those sideburns, but it tends to be a more muted kind of brown or olive green. And they will also have that smaller cap. So females will sometimes have like more of a darker cap, but it's pretty small. These guys tend to stick to the understory of the forest, so you'll see them even when they're nesting. They tend to be at the base of like ferns and shrubs and plants like that, kind of well hidden. And you'll see them as you're moving through, you'll either see them kind of hopping on lower branches or even on the forest floor, kind of picking at the leaves and moving things around, trying to find some good bugs. Like I said, they do nest here, so you can see them mid-April through around September is when they head out. Then we have an ovenbird, which is also a warbler. They are described by Cornell as rather chunky for a warbler. They have these bold black spots on their breast, this white eye ring, and then that crown, which is kind of a black and orange stripe. They get their name because they build a domed nest that resembles a Dutch oven. So it has a top and then usually like a side entrance. They tend to prefer like large, mature broadleaf forests, or mixed, so both broadleaf and coniferous forest. But they do really prefer to have large patches. So you're probably not going to see them in, a small patch forest, but anywhere where there's at least, a pretty decent size to your tree stand. You might get some ovenbirds hanging around. They do nest around here, so you have a chance of finding those cute little Dutch oven nests. You'll see them usually April through October, and they are also one that you can see on the ground. So they like to forage around the leaf litter, and can also be seen like on the branches, actually picking bugs off of the trees as well. We got a couple water thrushes that visit. Louisiana water thrush will visit and hang around. They will breed here. This bottom one here actually was seen here at Clermont Park, breeding for the spring or for the season last year. They're not related to thrushes. However, they resemble a thrush. So that's how they got their name. They're mostly brown on top. The Louisiana ones have a white eyebrow stripe, and it gets wider at the back of the eyebrow stripe. So if you look at the northern, the eyebrow stripe is more tan. Some of them will be white, but it kind of gets skinnier, whereas this one widens. That's one of the biggest like physical differences between them. They'll have, those speckled breasts. Louisiana water thrushes are known for bobbing their tails while they walk. So they're pretty animated. These guys are found usually along streams moving water. They really like to stand actually in the water, and they'll eat stream macroinvertebrates. because they will eat those, they can be used as an indicator of stream quality, because that, if they're not finding food, because of the stream's not healthy enough to support a healthy population of invertebrates, then they're not going to nest there. So usually if you have some water thrushes nesting nearby, it's a good indication that you've got some good bugs and healthy creeks going on. They do have a larger beak than the northern water thrush, but the biggest difference between the two is just where they are. Northern water thrushes tend to hang out near bogs, swamps, anywhere with like still water. So they like wetlands. They don't really like moving water. Northern water thrushes are also migratory. While the Louisiana will hang out and breed here, northern water thrushes move on through. You're only going to see them usually about, the peak is like May, and then they'll show up again August through September. As you can see on this guy, some of the individuals will have more of a yellow tone to their belly. And they are known also for hunting any macroinvertebrates, aquatic insects, even small salamanders. Ovenbirds are usually ground nesters. Sorry, I didn't have that in my notes. Good question. Let's see, we got our common yellow throat. So these are our final two warblers for the night. Common yellow throats are pretty small. The males have this black face stripe, and that yellow throat. Females are browner, but they still have that yellow throat and breast. And the males will also have that little white cap on their head, that little stripe. They are usually found low, usually in places where you're going to see sparrows. So any dense thickets, dense brush. Right around this, if you're there in the right time of year and you see some sparrows hopping around, there might be some yellow throats in with those sparrows. They are most common in wet areas. So if you're around a wetland or a pond or anything like that, they really like those areas. And they are another ground nester. They'll build their nest near the ground, usually supported by like grasses, sedges, cattails, anything like that. They'll kind of perch it on there. You're mostly going to see them late April through mid-October. So they're an earlier visitor here. They are very susceptible to poor water quality though, because they prefer those wet areas and they will eat those stream insects. If there's bad water quality, it does tend to impact them a little more. And then our final warbler, actually not technically a warbler, but looks like it. Yellow-breasted chat, not technically a warbler, but they have that yellow, which is very similar to a lot of our warblers. They have a very long tail and a big head. They are pretty large. They're about 7 inches long, so definitely bigger than most warblers. They have white spectacles on their eye, so that eye stripe connects to their beak. So it looks kind of like a pair of spectacles. And then they have another white half circle underneath their eye. And then another little white mustache stripe. So they've got a lot of white striping going on their head, and then they have this yellow breast that ends with a white patch on their closer to their rump. You're usually going to see them again in low, thick brush. They really like hopping around in there finding bugs. They do nest around here. You'll see them pretty much throughout the summer. They like old fields and then the edges of woodlands. So anywhere where there's like raspberry, blackberry vines, dogwoods are a favorite. Grapevine also is a favorite for them to kind of hide out in. They'll build their nest anywhere from like 1 foot above the ground to 8 feet above the ground, but they stay pretty low to the ground. And these guys actually were considered a warbler for decades, up until the late 2010s. They were just lumped in with all the warblers, and then just through research, scientists decided there are enough differences, both behaviorally and anatomically, to give them their own species, and give them their own family. And they also have a wider variety of song than most warblers. So warblers tend to stick to like 1 or 2 noises, whereas chats are known for freestyling and having a bunch of different songs. So variety of things, but they finally got their own family. And they are both a fruit and a bug eater. So they will, not picky, they'll eat pretty much anything. All right, so our birding spot of the week is Clermont Park. That's our main office property for Clermont County Park District. It's in Batavia, technically, but it is off of US 50 moving towards Owensville. So if you're familiar with where the Clermont County Fairgrounds are, it's just down the road from there. There's 132 acres. There's a little over 3 miles, almost 4 miles of trails through woodland, fields, ponds. The trails also connect to Pattison Lodge. And there's a couple more trails there. So you can really spend a day out there. As of right now, there's been about 100 species reported on eBird. Now, this park has only been open to the public for, I think, 3 years, 3 or 4 years now. So it's a little younger, and it's not quite as well known. So if you're looking for a nice, uninterrupted hike, we also have some bluebird boxes here. We got about, I think, 32 set up throughout the park. That if you're interested in the summertime, we do a bluebird box monitoring program. You can volunteer to once a week, once every other week, a couple times a month, whatever. You can come check through our boxes and see if there's eggs or babies. It's a very fun way to kind of contribute to some community science around here. All right, and our last tip on being a bird friend is all about netting. So there's a lot of different types of netting, whether it's sports nets, landscape netting, fake cobwebs, fishing line. Birds can't see that, and so they can get tangled in it pretty easily. We've got a screech owl that's tangled up in some fake cobwebs, some of those Halloween decorations. This poor hawk is completely tangled in fishing line. And then we've got a little lady cardinal all tangled up in some, it looks probably like a soccer net there. I personally was touring a place and came across a robin that had gotten tangled up in some of their landscape netting. So I had to like stop the group and I was like, hang on, sorry. Let me untangle this guy real quick. But, if you're going fishing, pick up your netting or pick up your fishing line. Don't leave it laying around. If you're out somewhere where you see fishing line, go ahead and gather that up. If you have any sort of if you have a basketball hoop in the wintertime or in the off season, just go ahead and take the netting off of that. Same thing with soccer goals. Go ahead and take that netting down. And try to avoid using fake cobwebs outside. They look cool, but they look a lot less cool when you have a poor bird all tangled up in them. So try to keep that inside. But yeah, just reduce the time that you have any sort of netting, any sort of things that birds can get tangled up in. They're really good at not seeing them and then panicking when they do hit them. They can get themselves even more tangled up. All right, with that, I'll leave a little bit of time for questions. We have our last intro to birding hike on January 3rd, so not this Saturday, but the Saturday after. That'll be at Kelly Nature Preserve up in Loveland. That'll be at 9:30. That we'll head out. And again, I'll send out a reminder ahead of time. And then the Saturday after that, we have our annual winter bird count that happens all over the county. At several of our parks, you choose the park to count at. We will have a staff member at each location, count for a couple hours, and then come back. We usually all will congregate up at Clermont Park. We'll serve some soup because it's usually very cold. I think I've done it in the snow the past 2 years. I don't think there was snow the first year I did it. Past couple of years we've been in the snow. But we'll eat some soup and compare numbers and tally it all up. So that one you can register for free on our website. And that's January 10th. We'll head out at 9 a.m. With that, if you have any other questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. But thank you so much for joining this course. I feel like it's flown by. But thanks for joining and learning about some birds. Hopefully I'll see some of you on January 3rd. And we'll hopefully do some more classes like this in the future. This is a little bit of a test to see how it would go. And I think you all made it go really well, so appreciate that. But yeah. All right, thank you very much. I'll send out the recording in the next couple of days. Probably not on Thursday since that is Christmas, but you should get it before the end of the week. And then I'll see you on January 3rd. Thank you very much.